Taking a peek at the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Hyundai Santa Fe. This is the 2024 model, so we've got that redesign. Oh, it looks nice. Honestly, a little bit Land Rover Defender-esque, but overall, I'd say it's solid. Now, a few things I'm going to point out. First one is that the steering wheel is heated, and there's the option of toggling it on. There's the button down the center stack there. So very interesting animation as you toggle it on off, but it's heated all the way around. The steering wheel is also manual telescoping. So just by your left knee, there's a release there in order to go in, out, up and down. And once you find that perfect position, click it, lock it back into place. A few things you're going to notice here. So you've got all of your various sticks all over the place. The stick on the left-hand side is going to be for your blinkers, for flashing at your high beams, whatever the case may be. Now, you've also got the option of adjusting your lights this way. So lights off, auto, etc. You're going to be in the auto mode the majority of the time. And when you're in the auto mode, you can push away to put your high beams into an auto mode. And what that means is that if the vehicle recognizes the high beams are needed, it's going to turn them on. If somebody's oncoming, it's going to dim them before bringing them right back on again. You could always flash your high beams out that way. But if you wanted to permanently lock your high beams out, go to the mode at the very top. You could then push away to turn your high beams on, pull towards you in order to turn them off. But you're going to be in that auto mode the majority of the time. Stick on the right-hand side is going to be for your front wipers. You can go up to the intermittent mode and then use this in order to move between how fast or slow you're going in that intermittent mode, or one of the hyperspeed modes instead. You can then adjust your rear wipers this way, so high, low versus off. You're going to pull towards you for the front wiper fluid. You're going to push away in order to get that rear wiper fluid going. And then there's this stick along the bottom right-hand side. It's your gear shifter. So rather than having a hand shifter, column shifter, whatever the case may be, it's shift by wire instead. So you're just going to go brake, drive, neutral, reverse, or park. Straightforward. But drive, so this one's got the forward sensing system, so you can hear it going nuts there, versus going into neutral or reverse. If you had the full 360 camera, that would also pull up. And then there's a button on the tip of that stick in order to put yourself into park. So very straightforward using it. And then there's also paddle shifters. But the paddle shifters inside of the hybrid, which this one is, work very different than the paddle shifters you're going to find in a traditional car. So this was more like an EV type of a feel instead. So you've got your minus to go drop down into different levels. So hold on, if we go drive for a second. So you could go level 1, 2, 3, etc. And what that's doing, as you go into those different modes, it's the level of the regenerative braking that you get. So when you're in level 3, you take your foot off of the accelerator and you slow down very rapidly. Versus if you're on level 1, you take your foot off the accelerator, you're going to slow down very slowly instead. So the benefit of having it at level 3 is if you want to recharge the battery, and that's going to adjust what's going on inside of the gauges here as we go. But I'll touch on those gauges as we zoom in. There are a series of different buttons here. So because this one doesn't have factory navigation, when you hit this button, it's going to be the option of activating your Google or your Siri Assistant. So because this one doesn't have navigation, it's just going to do that. But if you had factory navigation and you push there, you'd be able to navigate using your voice. You could still use it as a button for your assistant on your phone, but then you'd also be able to do things like change songs, radio stations, and so many other features as well. You can answer or hang up on a phone call. You can jump between different modes as well. So whether that's sounds of nature, AM, FM, Sirius XM, whatever the case may be, you can adjust these through the infotainment system there. There's also this custom button, which you can get it to do a few different things, and same idea. You can adjust that through the infotainment system under your buttons. So there's the option of adjusting what those buttons do, along with this one. So this as a default, we go into media, is going to change out all of your different presets. So if we go, let's go this way to AM, FM. If we hop into our favorites, so you can see there, going up or down in between all of our favorited stations. This is going to be your volume rocker. So you can easily go up or down this way for audio, push in the middle in order to be able to mute. So mute, unmute, whatever the case may be. From there, you've got a series of different buttons along the left-hand side. So you've got these ones for your smart cruise control. All you're going to do, as you're driving, toggle it on there. And then, so the system essentially is turned on, but in order to activate it, you just push the up button there in order to do it. So we've set it at 50. You could then pause it if you want to, resume it. You could go down or up 1 kilometer, 1 mile per hour at a time. And then there's a distance indicator. So it's how close or far are you away from the vehicle that's in front of you. So very straightforward using it. It's going to take you down to a complete stop here. And then it's also got the flexibility of picking you right back up to your set speed again. If you stop for longer than a few seconds, it's going to prompt you to either hit the gas to keep going or push the up button to resume your previously set speed instead. And then there's also a lane following system. So that's going to keep you perfectly balanced in your lane. So it's a lane follow assist. There are two different options. There's a lane follow assist or a lane keep assist. So the lane follow assist is the one that we have enabled right now. So you can see here, so it's going to take me around a bend without my hands on the steering wheel. So it's very good from that perspective. The lane keep assist is going to gently nudge you back into your lane instead. But you can see there, it's how close or far are you away from the vehicle that's in front of you. So there are 4 different distance indicators there, so you can set your own personal preference. I normally recommend 1 just on residential streets, but you could go either 2 or 3 on the highway, or really like even 4 if you really wanted to. It's just a matter of your own personal comfort level. And then you've got these 2 buttons, and that's going to be a pages button to get you through a few different options, and then scroll wheel to go up and down between those options. So let's hop inside of the cluster screen here and walk you through a few other things. So you've got your traditional speedometer off to the left-hand side. This, think of it like your tachometer. So you've got your basic charge mode, eco mode, and power. So general rule of thumb is that as you're driving, you're going to be using this bar. So as you go to put your foot down and use the gas, so you'll notice that the eco mode there is kind of going to go up. As you're driving and you hit the brake, you'll notice that the charge pad starts to drop there as well. And that's the amount of recharge that the battery's getting. So this is obviously the hybrid. From there, you've got a few other options. You've got what's going on with your current fuel level, and then you've got what mode you're currently in, vehicle's ready to drive, current outside temperature, what gear you're in, so whether that's park, reverse, neutral, drive, whatever the case may be. And because this has the forward reverse sensing system, as we get closer to obstacles, you can see that pop up there as well. Now, I'm currently in the EV mode right now because I'm stopped doing the review, but you might notice that this pops on every now and again and jumps up to a few thousand RPM before turning back off. So it's just trying to essentially optimize us to keep us in EV all of the time. But the vehicle's smart. It's going to switch you between either EV or traditional driving mode, like your traditional gas engine, very seamlessly. So if you're coasting, you're going to be in your EV mode instead. If you're gunning it, you're going to hop out of the EV mode. So the vehicle is very smart from that perspective. And you'll notice that the fuel gauge, when you do that, when you jump into EV, your fuel gauge is going to drop down to 0. So you're not actively using anything. So nothing's going to show. But as you start to drive, you'll notice that your fuel gauge usage is going to adjust on the fly there. So it's saying 0 right now because there's nothing that's been used. But if we scroll down to since refueling, you can see there. So there are 2 different counters. So you've got your current trip counter. So that's since the vehicle is last turned on. It's very low because I'm in EV mode and I'm just shooting the video. But since refueling, so I picked this car up and I've put on 126 kilometers so far, 4 hours of driving. And as of right now, I've used 8.3 liters per 100. And you can see there. So that's your current counter as well. So it's used 8.3 liters per 100. Miles per gallon is going to work the exact same way. But you've got this little, you can see there, that little notch that's pointing down, and that's going to essentially denote 8.3. So you'll notice that that's going to drop. So it's either going to drop or increase depending on how much fuel you're actively using. So obviously if you were miles per gallon, the counter would go up. Liters per 100, you're going to drop down instead. You could then go to a few other options using that scroll wheel. So you've got your current trip since you've refueled the vehicle. So think of that as your trip counter as well as your last reset. So you've got a few different counters there. So since the car was last turned on, since you last filled up the tank, and then your total trip counter. And then you can easily reset these. So on any of these options, you can push and hold the OK button in order to be able to reset on the ones that have that available there. So you've got your hold OK, whatever the case may be. Current engine temperature, yeah, you can see the car's turning on. So it kicked me out of the EV mode to get that gas engine going for a second to charge the battery. Tire pressure, you have to drive in order to display it. And then you've got which wheel is getting which amount of power. So inside of the Santa Fe, it's either going to be front wheel drive or all wheel drive. If you were front wheel drive, you just have the front 2 wheels showing. But because this is all wheel drive, you'll see which wheel gets which amount of power. For the most part, if you're just cruising on the highway, you might notice that the rear wheels are doing the majority of the work. And then back down to see charge. Yeah, you can see there. So we're actively charging. So I'm on 3 levels for the battery itself. So you'll notice that the engine comes on in order to be able to charge the battery up. But that's one really nice thing. Yeah, and off it goes. So you'll see there as you're on the idle mode, so whether or not the vehicle is relying on the EV mode or if it's charging up, and it does it automatically because the hybrid is not a plug-in. And then you've got your basics there. So again, all of your different counters. You can hit the little settings icon to get back to get to this screen, and this one is essentially going to be your drive assistance screen. So as you start to drive, you'll notice that there are a few things that show up. If somebody's entered your blind spot, you get a little notification along the bottom left-hand side there. It's really nice. And then you can also push and hold the OK button there in order to be able to get to a series of driver assistance settings. And there are a lot of different settings that are available. So driver convenience, cluster screen options, and things like that. But let's go. So there are a few interesting ones that we could look at. Actually, let's go home, setup. Going to go cluster. There we go. So cluster, you can change the screen brightness, cluster theme selection. So there are a few different options available. So whether that's classic versus simple. So if you prefer that, traditional look instead. And then you can also link the graphics to your drive mode. So there's a selector switch down the center stack, and when you adjust that, do you want to be in Eco, Sport versus a custom mode? And then do you want to be in a unique terrain mode as well? So it's going to change things. So it's going to play with your traction stability control, things like that. Versus in your Sport mode, it's going to hold on to your RPMs a little bit longer, so it gives you a sportier performance. But if you see there, when you're in the Sport mode, it gets rid of all of the added fuel savings that you would get from being in the Eco mode. So you see there, it essentially switches you out to a traditional tachometer instead. But if you love the look, or the functionality, I should say, of the Eco mode, you've also got the flexibility of locking the graphics out to a different mode. So if you like that Sport mode look instead, you can kind of tweak it out a little bit if you'd like to. And then there are a series of other options like tachometer display, like what do you want showing it up? How do you want it showing? Whatever the case may be. So it is kind of neat that that's available, but if you want a full walkthrough on the infotainment system, you'll find that down in the description of the video. But there are a lot of things to know inside of that screen. But that's the basics there. So you've got your current battery level along the middle there. And then I mentioned all of the different buttons along the very top, or the icons along the very top there. So I know that that's a lot of information, but that's everything that you need to know about the steering wheel as well as the cluster screen inside of the Santa Fe Hybrid.